And action. Good morning. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Pulse of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and joining me is Ron Caniff and Alfredo Arteaga, the 3 yards per carry. So we may or may not be joined also by Chad Ronnebaum later in the show. We always get some good debates when Chad shows up. So Miami Dolphins season, it is now come to a close, but that just means that it's a new beginning for what will be the 2023 season. There's plenty of stuff to talk about. Where will the Miami Dolphins go from here? We will get into all of that. But before we get too far into everything, as always, I just want to head and mention that our sponsor for this show is PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues, the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, all in one league. It's up to you to decide how you want to go. Sometimes you may get allergic to certain players. Like I never will pick Paolo Banchero again, but there are other players that I absolutely will pick plenty of the time. Just choose the over or the under on those individual players' fantasy projections, whether that's individual stats or the classic fantasy point projections. They even occasionally send you freebie picks they take advantage of. They'll give you discounted picks during Taco Tuesday promos, and they'll even send you your money back if you lose on Flex Fridays, where you can get all up to $20 back if you lose. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up. Use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your first deposit when you sign up using that promo code. Again, that's the promo code 5, FIVE. PrizePicks.com. Go over there right now. Get yourself some wins in while you still have the chance. Alrighty. So we're going to get into everything. Matthias, you're back. Okay, welcome back, my friend. Really glad to have you with us. So we got plenty of stuff to talk about. Miami Dolphins put up much more of a fight than they were supposed to against the Buffalo Bills. And I'm going to go ahead and say this because I was in the OnlyFins just now, and somebody had asked the question, will this be pro or anti Josh Boyer content?
Well, I saw that.
So just speaking strictly for myself, I personally am not a fan of keeping the scheme just intact the way it is. The zero blitz whole thing, it requires a lot of player execution. It kind of leaves a lot of players on an island a lot of the time. So what I am hoping for, and I want a real option would be Vic Fangio. I don't think it's going to happen, but nevertheless. So, but in any case, I will also say that part of the speculation that I was having is that the defensive performance put against the Buffalo Bills during that wild card round may or may not have saved Josh Boyer's job, because let's be real about something. Without Xavier Howard making that interception on that deep pass, without Javon Holland being in the right place, the right time, making a very tip drill, Minkah Fitzpatrick-like move, without Zach Sealer doing what he's doing, that game would not have even been remotely close, because
so if the Miami Dolphins had not played football, this would have been a really, really, disparate score. It would have been a blowout.
I mean, well, yeah, pretty much. I mean,
without the turnovers,
without all those turnovers that they
forced, without forcing the turnovers, which you can't always guarantee. I mean, Josh Allen threw and if you want to say that Josh Boyer's defensive performance against a good quarterback, the best you got is what he's done against Allen this year. Allen's thrown 10 touchdowns or 8 or 9, 10 touchdowns and 1,000. I don't think I'm even exaggerating when I say 1,000 yards against us this year in 3 games. I mean, we've kept it close for a few different reasons. In the second game, it was definitely our offense and Tua that kept it close. And in the third game, I guess it was the turnovers. I mean, what can we say? But just can't guarantee those. And even with the turnovers, Josh Allen had a pretty big game.
Yeah, but it was 7 sacks, 24 pressures, 17 quarterback hits, 3 turnovers. And the turnovers were all, they weren't fluky. I'll tell you one thing. The first time they played Josh Allen, they should have had 5 interceptions. And they just flat out.
That's true. They just kept dropping them. No doubt. That first game in Miami.
They should have won that game. Dolphins should have won that first game comfortably.
Yeah.
That first time. This game, I don't consider any of the turnovers fluky. One was a blitz off the edge. They jarred the ball loose. They scored with it. The tip drill one, it was a bad decision. It was well covered. If you notice the play, Dolphins were in a cloud coverage, and he threw right into it. And that's usually what's supposed to happen. And the other one was just Xavier Howard being Xavier Howard. He tracked the ball beautifully and picked it off. So I thought the Dolphins played great. I don't buy into any of that. Like, let's poo-poo how they played and to give the Bills some kind of credit. No. The Dolphins played good enough to win that game.
I guess that's
and
really...
they probably deserved to win that game, if we're being honest.
Oh, I think they had more chances to win this game than they had to win the second game of the season. I don't know that was really the conversation. I think the topic at hand is Boyer's defensive performance against the Bills and Allen, is that enough to save his job? I think that's really, what do you think, Alf? Has he done enough to save his job, or should we be...
I think the case for Boyer is how the defense played at home and how it played down the stretch, which is the last 3 games of the season. They were the number 1 defense in the NFL, and how they played against Josh Allen. That's the case for Boyer. And of course, what the defensive backs he's found and he's uncovered over his career, all of those things bode well for Josh Boyer. But I'm of the opinion, if you're going to replace Josh Boyer, you better have somebody already ready to take the job and in the pipeline, ready to sign his name on the contract. Firing your defensive coordinator because your defensive ranking was bad is what most dipshit teams do. And I was hoping that we were not going to be one of those dipshit teams. Because right now you're watching all the dipshit teams fire all their coaches with the bad rankings. And then who knows? Maybe they improved it in the following year. Maybe they don't. But I know Josh Allen. I know that Josh Boyer is a good coach. I know that for a fact. Guy owns 3 Super Bowl rings. Okay, coaching the secondary of the New England Patriots, which happened to be the strong point of those defenses. So he knows what the hell he's doing. Okay, and he's found a lot of good players. I'm for getting rid of him if you could replace him with somebody that we know is probably better, like a Vic Fangio. But if not, are you gonna poach the guy from Denver? Likely not. So, what's the use? You better have somebody good to replace him with if you're going to replace him.
Can I step in real quick before I know it's your turn, but want to just real quick.
Go ahead.
I just kind of want to poke holes in one thing. That best defense in the league last 3 games. Isn't that the story of that Flores type defense over the past 3 years? When they play really bad offenses, they play great. We played probably 2 of the worst offenses in the NFL in New England and the Jets in 2 of the 3 of those games. And let's admit that Green Bay's offense hasn't been fantastic this season either. So I think the problem with that defense in general, with Boyer and even under Flores, is that when we play the better teams, we get crushed. And that in the past with Flores was with all our defensive backs. We had X, we had Byron Jones, we had Brandon Jones, we had the whole crew there, and we would still get crushed against good quarterbacks. I think that's why I'm nervous about keeping Boyer, keeping this scheme going, and would rather see us look elsewhere.
So now the question is, does Josh Boyer deserve to stay? It's the question. That's the question, because yes, you're right, Ron. There were a lot of bad offenses, especially in those last 3 games, like Mac Jones. I'm not Mac Jones. Please, Mac Jones. Joe Flacco. Okay, sure. Am I supposed to be scared of Joe Flacco and Mac Jones? And that was, again, what I said at the name of the Jets game. That Jets game was the most boring, stressful game that I have ever encountered in my life. Most stressful games is like, it at least has some moments of excitement in it. That Jets game was miserable from start to finish. I can't even say it was a great defensive performance because I know that it's Skylar Thompson on one side and Joe Flacco on the other side. So if you want to say, oh, Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl, and even when he won the Super Bowl, I was like, his job seems to be heaving it as far as he can, and somebody comes down with it. But maybe that's doing a disservice to the Joe Flacco of old. I digress. Josh Boyer, for me, I just feel like the way that his scheme functions, and Alf, you can probably educate me on it if you'd like, but it feels like to me that it's very, very insistent that players have to just make big plays like all the time. Turnovers have to happen. And if the turnovers do not happen, we kind of get what we got this year. The defense was not able to be sustained. It was not able to actually stop teams from getting yards. It was not able to stop teams from scoring a lot of the time. It was more precedented on you have to make the big interception and let the offense then score afterwards. It was more precedented on forcing fumbles, making just incredible highlight reel moves. And in the years that Flores was here, that's when we thought this defense is one of the best defenses ever because they're making turnovers on a regular basis. When you can't guarantee that happens, that's when we get what happened this year. It doesn't look all that great. So maybe you can tell me more about the scheme, tell me why I'm wrong about what I'm looking at, but I just feel like the defense was not, the way that it was built is not sustainable.
It's not sustainable with the injuries that they had, but the scheme is more man-centric, and it's supposed to induce quarterbacks to do one thing when you do another. And I understand that, it didn't work out for the most part this year. They didn't have their guys. You can't play a lot of man when you don't have the guys that you used to have. But as far as what they got to do going forward is that they got to start switching it up a little bit more. And we started to see it going forward. We started to see more of those changes going forward. And I thought that Josh Boyer called his best game of the year against the Bills. And I understand that they scored 34 points. Look at what we had at quarterback. If Tua is in there, trust me, they don't score 34 points because we'll sustain more drives. They score in the 20s and we probably beat them. But he was calling a really good game because it wasn't necessarily that he was bringing zero blitzes because he brought it like only 3 times, but he showed the look a ton of times and induced a bunch of check down screens where they rallied and tackled off of their look. And he actually induced a couple of deep balls too. There was one play in particular where he showed zero blitz, and then he had Javon Holland sprint to the hash to pick up Diggs on the go route. And it was going to be essentially double covered. X and Holland were going to double cover Stephon Diggs, trying to induce another Josh Allen go route. But Josh Allen spotted it at the last second, and he checked it down. In that respect, it actually worked. It was a really, really good game that Josh Boyer called. But they got to evolve toward, gearing the defense toward that front four because that's the identity of the team on defense going forward. It's Chubb, Wilkins, Sealer, and Phillips. That's the identity of the team going forward. That's who the guys. Those are the stars on Sunday, and that'll be why they win going forward. Like if we're here in a year from now, and they're in the Super Bowl, I'm pretty sure that they're in the Super Bowl because of 2 reasons: Tua, Waddle, and Hill found their connection, and that front four had a monster year again, and that's where they got to lean toward. And I'm for any coach that's going to adapt the scheme for those 4 guys because that's the best part of the team as of right now.
I agree with you, but now the question is,
why is Josh Boyer the guy to do that?
Because he's already here and it's his whole staff. And if you fire him, you're essentially firing 6 other guys. And when you do wholesale changes, it usually doesn't always work out. So I'm wondering. I'm willing to do wholesale changes on that side of the ball if you get the right guy. Like a Vic Fangio is the guy that would be the right guy. But there's no indication that they're in on Fangio. But we'll see in a day or so what they're going to do with this side of the ball. There's a few guys that you want to keep. You want to keep Austin Clark, the defensive line coach. He's a rising star. And you want to keep Steve Gregory, the secondary coach. And you probably want to keep Sam Madison, who's had success everywhere he's been. So, and, you got to give him credit for him getting guys off the street or guys that were supposed to be, cornerback 5 and cornerback 4 ready to play week in and week out and getting a UDFA and Kader Kohu to have such a good season. So there's guys that you want to keep. And usually when you do wholesale changes on the defensive side of the ball, they fire everybody. And the new DC comes in with his own guys. Yeah. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do in a day or so.
And it feels like 50-50 to me. I mean, I don't have any inside sources, but the fact that it just hasn't quite happened yet makes me think that I mean, we just don't know. We really don't know what they're thinking.
I mean, I'm sure that didn't Mike McDaniel say that he was proud of Boyer and how everything worked out at the end. So if nothing else, I don't think McDaniel's looking to necessarily just move on from Boyer wholesale. Otherwise, he would have just said that I wish we could have performed better, and all the very neutral talk, but also the
But it's also
not
going to
happy
come
talk.
down. It's going to come down to Mike McDaniel wanting to do it. It's up to him. It's his coaching staff, and that's why you could kind of you can see the writing on the wall that maybe Darrell Bevell is actually getting a promotion because him turning down those two jobs seems is that first of all it's good, really good news. Second of all, it bodes well for Tua going forward, and third of all, it bodes well for Darrell Bevell because it seems like he might be getting a promotion here very, very soon.
All right, but so if we're going to go on the offensive side of the ball, so what does that mean for Frank Smith? He's moving on. He's getting fired. I mean, did he? I was under the impression that Frank Smith was also very good at his job. But if Bevel is going to be offensive coordinator, does Bevel take a demotion? Does Smith take a demotion? Does he do a different job, or is he just moving on?
Maybe he gets a job in college. There was a rumor that he was going to be up for a few jobs in college. We'll see on that regard, but we do know that Shane Day got fired in LA, which is interesting because Tua's getting guys hired and Herbert's getting guys fired. But Shane Day is available. Shane Day and Mike McDaniel are pretty tight. And if you're talking about a guy that could swoop right in and take over Darrell Bevell's job as Darrell Bevell gets promoted, that would be Shane Day. So, 2 + 2 sometimes equals 4. It looks that way, at least on the offensive side of the ball. It looks like a safe bet as of right now.
I mean, on offense, I wouldn't really change that much. I would definitely change whatever the structure is for getting the play calls in. That's for sure. If there's anything,
was there a problem with that?
No, not at all. It was perfect.
Yeah, but sometimes it will take a severe demotion of somebody. It could be John Embry. It could be Frank Smith. It's whoever was on the personnel side, because you could watch on the video. Play calls were getting in. What was happening was the organization from the play call to the actual play getting run was not getting done. We do know this. They had 8 delay of game penalties all year. 8. They had 2 with Tua in 12 games. They had 6 with the other guys in 5 games.
So we're putting that more on the quarterbacks than anything else.
Quarterbacks have a huge, huge say in it. The quarterbacks, they're to blame. Like that's part of the blame. Like they own a pretty good chunk. The rest of it is on the personnel side, and then the guy who's ultimately responsible is Mike McDaniel. And that's another reason why you probably, firing Josh Boyer just for the sake of firing him is probably a bad idea, because everybody's going to look like, buddy, like we're not in Kansas City this week playing the Chiefs because your offense couldn't function for most of that game. Our defense did enough to win the game.
Yeah, so, but you had third string quarterback. You also had one of the top offenses all year. Josh Boyer had the worst defense in the AFC and the worst defense on the road in points allowed.
Yeah, but that's the argument
to be considered.
Yeah, that's the argument on the other side. They're just going to argue how it went down in Buffalo.
I mean, Boyer can easily make the same argument regarding what happened with the offense. Oh, you had Skylar Thompson instead of Tua Tagovailoa. I had Keon Crossan instead of Byron Jones.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. So, I just did not want to be. And so far, it looks like they're actually taking their time with this, and they're going to make a real decision. I did not want to be, like I said, I don't want to be one of those dipshit teams. You saw them all week. All the dipshit teams were running out there firing everybody. Look, the Chargers, complete dipshit team. Brandon Staley is a complete clown. And what did that guy do? His defense sucked, okay, and sucked for 2 years. And he fired everybody on the offensive side of the ball. Good coaches. Joe Lombardi had I could find you the articles from when Joe Lombardi got hired to go to the Chargers. How everybody was like, oh my God, Justin Herbert's gonna blow up now. They got the guy from New Orleans who's a stud. Well, they canned him. Okay. So they fired all their offensive coaches and they put the blame on them. When they gave them a 27-0 lead. Okay, the offense didn't only scored 3 points in the second half. Why did you give up a 27-0 lead on defense when that's your side of the ball? So I just don't want to be one of those teams. So far, it's looking like we're not one of those teams, which is a good sign.
So now the other thing I want to talk about, and it's interesting, Renegade 28. I'm excited that Tua will not have to learn a new offensive system for the first time in his career. We can
That's true.
We can
That's true.
Finally, yes, for once. So let's talk about that real quick. So we've heard the reports, and obviously the rumors started swirling that the Miami Dolphins are interested in Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's going to come and no, because now here comes Adam Schefter out of left field to say, hey, guess what, everybody? No, Mike McDaniel and Tua and all those other people that you're talking about, they are still very much going to still be sticking around. So basically, when Schefter says something, all those guys like Florio and whoever else wants to stir the pot, they basically have to go kick rocks, because Adam Schefter is like, what is it? The Waj of football. So if he says something, it's the truth. So at that point, what else can you argue? Schefter literally said, Tua's the starter, McDaniel's the coach, everybody else go ignore everything else. So
yeah, and look, when Dolphin fans say, I remember the 90s, the late 80s, the 90s, Dolphins were 11-5, 11-5, 12-4, 10-6 in the playoffs every single year. You know what they had? They had Gary Stevens' offensive system and Dan Marino all those years. It was the same system year in, year out. There was continuity. This is the first time Tua was going to have that since his freshman year in college. Because in college, he went from Brian Daboll to Lane Kiffin to Steve Sarkisian to getting drafted. And we have Chan Gailey. And then we don't have Chan Gailey. Then we have the Politburo, the three-headed monster that was Studsville, Godsey, and who the hell was the other guy?
The Three Stooges. That's right.
Godsey, Studsville, and wasn't it his former quarterback coach, Charlie Fry?
Yeah, Charlie Fry. Yeah, the three guys. And then this year you got Mike McDaniel. Well, guess what? This will be the first time in his career since his freshman year in college. He's going to have the same system 2 years in a row.
Well,
and a system that he was actually really, really effective in the first year.
This is true. However, just out of curiosity, if Frank Smith goes and Darrell Bevel takes over, does the loss of Smith make any adjustments to the whole shebang?
No, it just means that Darrell Bevel, who was the quarterback's coach, who was the guy that used to talk to Tua the most, is not going to talk to Tua even more. Because if he's getting promoted, who knows? Maybe it's coming with more opportunity to call plays. Or who knows? Maybe Mike McDaniel's actually giving up play calling or something to try to concentrate on getting plays in.
I was going to ask you about that. You think he's willing to give up play calling?
I think so. Does he strike you as a guy who's like an egomaniac? I think he just wants problems solved. Yeah. And he wants to be successful.
I agree.
So I think if he sees, you know what? And it's going to be a thing, him, Tua, and Bevel, they're going to sit down and they're going to try to figure that out. But we know for a fact that their operation was not working this year. We know that they switched from what they originally wanted to do, and they started moving on to different methods of doing things, to the point where they got to the end of the season. They were back to how every NFL team operates since the beginning of time. You got a personnel guy, you got the coordinator, and you got the QB coach, and then you have the position coaches trying to get their personnel in. So they went right back to the same system that everybody else runs. So they tried to be innovative. It blew up in the face, and then they changed things. Now it's probably going to be streamlined once again, but this time with the same people. So that should bring about some good changes, I hope.
Could they shorten the amount of verbiage in the play itself? Because I'm watching McDaniel call that play, and man, it looks like it takes a long time for him just to call the play.
Yeah.
And then the quarterback's got to find it on his wristband, and then it takes him that amount of time to get to call the play. And then by the time he gets to the line, it's like 7-8 seconds, and they're always running motion. And just feels like there's got to be a place somewhere to save some time.
Yeah, they're gonna have to probably start cutting some of it down. Usually, what happens is, when you're in the system for a while, the plays become such second nature that once you start reciting the play, the quarterback already knows, and he's already cut off the coach, and he's already reciting it. Okay, so it becomes second nature. That's something that with Tua was working toward the end of the year, where you could see there was a couple of games where they were having organizational issues on the sideline, and you could see Tua was just like, all right, screw it. He was probably calling his own play, and that's something that would happen in real life. Like, the ref, like a quarterback can look and he knows, because remember where he's lined up and where his huddle is, he's staring at the play clock. So he sees the play clock going down. That's one thing where a quarterback is looking at it, sees the play clock at 10, and he's all right, screw it. You guys don't have it in? I'm calling this. And he looks at the personnel, what's in the game, and he just calls his own play and he runs it. They don't have any timeouts. So, and that happens all the time, believe it or not.
Yeah, but Skylar Thompson.
So with a third string quarterback, that's too much to ask. It's just way too much to ask.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was completely on Mike McDaniel, because Mike McDaniel needed to realize, you know what? Clock is ticking here. Just get this call in and just have it executed. And evidently he called something that was way too tricky, that involved changing personnel, and it was a complete disaster. And it probably cost them the game.
Oh, we're talking about the 4th and 1.
Yeah.
I mean, that 4th and 1 is going to be living in the nightmares of Dolphins fans all off season. But again, if we're going to just talk about that Buffalo Bills wild card game, the fact that we were even in it as far as we were, we were all on the show, and Chad was there too. We were all assuming this was going to be an absolute, most of us anyway.
I had 38-13. That's what I had picked.
It was supposed to be a blowout.
I thought it was going to be a blowout, man. It started out that way too. So
yeah, that's why I was like, okay, well, I thought that too. I was like, okay, so I'm just going to be able to, I'm going to be upset because they're losing, because that's how I am. But it's just a simple matter of, it is what it is. We all expected this. But when they actually started coming back and they actually made it a game, like the stress kicked in. I'm like, oh my God, we could actually do this. We could actually pull off a miracle. And man, can you imagine the stress level the NFL was feeling at that moment? Because the NFL was the one who basically, correct me if I'm wrong, the NFL was basically the one they did not want Miami in. B,
under any circumstances,
they did not want to have to stop Tua from clearing for a second week in a row.
No,
I know that Miami was. We know that Miami really wanted Tua to play. The fact that they didn't immediately knock him out of the question at the beginning of the week was proof enough. They were hoping, crossing their fingers, that Tua was going to be able to play. And essentially, from what I understand, the NFL told them, go kick rocks. Tua's not going to get to play. So if somehow Miami knocks out the NFL's golden boy, Josh Allen, and they move on to the next game, you have to be the NFL has to be thinking, if we clear Tua right now, we are going to never hear the end of it, because we're going to talk about the 3 concussions, which is technically only confirmed 2 concussions. Yeah. Some people say 3.
Some say 3, some say 2.
Depending on who you ask and whatever their motivations are.
But the NFL is doing themselves no favors with what they've done so far this year, and with the referee assignments this weekend. That's an absolute joke. They're buying into, basically they're going to help every single conspiracy theorist.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Everywhere.
Like, one of these teams is not like the others. Who is it? Oh, it's Jacksonville. Get them out of here.
Although Jacksonville and Kansas City, they drew Sean Hockley, one of the better officials. Cowboys, 49ers drew Bill Vinovich, the best official. But Bengals, Bills draws Carl Cheffers. Like, come on, man. Like, we're really gonna do this? Like, and I'll give you the numbers. The Bills are 10-2, the last 12 with Carl Cheffers. Carl Cheffers has a severe home team bias. It's worth 22 yards and 2 penalties a game. Okay. And you may say, oh, it's just 2 penalties and 22 yards. That's a lot. Okay. That's a huge disparity usually in for officiating. And of course, the Bengals absolutely suck with Charles Shepard. They're 6-10 in their last 16 games. So, they're doing it to themselves. So you would expect that the Bills are going to get some favorable calls this weekend. We shall see. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, the NFL has taken. It's been a terrible year for officiating. It just has been. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous in that game too.
It's been the worst year for officiating since the replacement refs.
Yeah, and they have an actual. And notice he doesn't have a single assignment in the playoffs. Jerome Boger, that guy's completely incompetent. That guy has to get fired. Like, they cannot have that guy referee games next year. Period. He's incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing.
I mean, these guys make $200,000 or more a year. They make good money.
They make that much? Dang!
Yes,
how do I become a referee?
Yes, they do in the NFL. Yes, they do, sir.
Yeah, and they're not part time. They have like their own businesses. They're part time. They have their own businesses. They have like their own professions. I think that's part of the reason. Make them full time, and you'll see, you'll get some improvement. Although the NBA made them full time and it got worse. So we shall see. But the NFL bought this and they're laying it. They love it.
Renegade 28, Lewis, you have to be partially blind to be a ref. Okay, well, here you go. I'm blind now. I can't see anything.
There's video from the game. Jalen Phillips got held so many times in that game.
Man.
I mean, we say that all the time, though. It's like, Zach Sealer got held, Christian Wilkins got held, Jalen Phillips got held, Bradley. We always say stuff like that. So
we saw on that play, the Buffalo Bill actually had the Dolphins player from behind in a chokehold. That's not holding. I mean, it's right there.
Not if it protects Josh Allen. It's not.
So ridiculous.
I'm still upset. And I can't believe that it wasn't called, because we all know up and down that if it had been Josh Allen, you already know what I'm going to say. You already know what I'm talking about. Skylar Thompson's running out of bounds, and Matt Milano just comes up and just like shoulder checks him off out of bounds. If that had been Josh Allen getting slammed by a Landon Roberts would have been ejected from the football game. So that's the kind of double standard that we get frustrated by, because we see it happening. We see it happen with other quarterbacks. If Tom Brady had been the guy who got knocked out, that's a penalty. If Josh Allen had been knocked out, that's a penalty. Patrick Mahomes, that's a penalty. Other quarterbacks, Skylar Thompson, no, probably not. Maybe not Lamar Jackson, since Lamar runs so much, it's harder to justify that. Guys like
Lamar Jackson has like reverse rules. Like they let your defense tee off on him when he runs.
Yeah, unfortunately they do. But he's a runner at that point, so it's different.
Yeah, so that's kind of fair.
I mean,
but Josh Allen is kind of a runner as well. Have you noticed that the Bills, every time that they get nervous, they just they start calling design runs by Josh Allen?
That's what they did, right? We saw him do one design run and we weren't ready for it.
Yeah, but it wasn't as bad as the previous game.
No, definitely not.
We did a much better job. I saw that they did some spying in this game, and the linebacker. Actually, they weren't using a linebacker this time, though. They were using a safety, Elijah Campbell, sometimes. I think that was the change, is they were using a quicker player to spy Josh Allen when they did this time, and it was more effective. Did you notice that, Alf?
Yeah, they did that a lot, and it was actually pretty effective.
It was. They used a quicker player. Instead of using a linebacker who's just way slower than Josh Allen, they were like, let's use a faster player to spy him. And it was the right move there. So next time they play,
and he had his moments. Elijah Campbell had his moments. He looked pretty good. He looked good in space with Josh Allen.
So
that was another thing that I noticed. Our defensive ends, they didn't care. Before, they were very, very conscious of keeping their lanes and keeping their lane discipline so they could pinch in Josh Allen into the pocket. This time they didn't care. This time they were just going balls out right at the quarterback. We're going off the edge and we don't give a shit. We're actually going to rush the passer. And look, it paid dividends.
Sure. I mean, it definitely helped. You could tell. And Jalen Phillips, poor kid, man. Like, he's the king of the almost sack. He really, really is.
Who,
like,
Phillips?
Phillips. He's like always like
So
like a
many
split
pressures.
second away from knocking him down. And
He gets his share though. How many did he have this season? 10?
he had
something like that.
hang on, let me
Yeah.
see.
I mean, he got some. He wasn't void of
I know
the-
he had the
7.
most. He had the most pressures in Dolphin history since Cam Wake in, I
Yeah.
believe, 2005.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about that defensive line, man, that defensive line with Wilkins, Sealer, Chubb, and Phillips, man, that's definitely a Super Bowl defensive line.
Yeah, like
don't
if
know.
we're
Dolphins have some Super Bowl pieces.
like if I told you right now it's January 18th, 2023, and I tell you next year the Dolphins won the Super Bowl, and I ask you why, like that's one of the answers. One of the answers is, Waddle, Hill, and Tua had that connection again because they were good enough to win a Super Bowl this year. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
if you had the number 2 offense, that's pretty good. You know what I mean? And with Tua, they had the number 2 offense with those 2 guys. But I think you go right away to those 4 guys excelled. They had monster years. Sealer, Wilkins, Phillips, and Chubb. Those guys had an awesome year. Like Chubb had 12 sacks. Phillips had 15 sacks. Wilkins was Wilkins, and Sealer was Sealer. That's how I could see it going forward. All those years where you used to say, the Dolphins are close, and it was all bullshit. Well,
Yeah.
now it's not. Now it's actually real. Dolphins actually are close.
No,
I mean,
it's
that's the
palpable.
first competitive playoff game we've played in over 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? We just got blown out, and when did we play?
And you got to
last?
understand, and I say this to everybody that asks me, like, what do you want to accomplish when you start the season? You want to win the division. Why? You get a home game in the playoffs, and that's almost a leg up to get to the Super Bowl because you're almost getting like a little boost, and that's the goal next year.
Yeah, the
the
whole
goal
team
next
advantage.
year is win the division. Next year, the goal is to win the division.
And it can be done. We proved that it can be done. The fact that they were even this close to get, I said it during the postgame show. It took the entire Buffalo Bills entourage to hold off Skylar Thompson and the Miami Dolphins, and it came down to the wire again. And a team that has such a supposedly wide gap between them. The gap is not here. The gap is here,
Yeah,
and it might not even be there because again, if Tua, this is the thing. If Tua was in the game, man. Is seeing how the defense played. If Tua's in the game, game's over.
Yeah,
we already won. Like we already won because there's no way that even if it's Tua on one of his bad days, there's no way the offense is that inept the way that it was with Skylar Thompson.
It wasn't as inept as I thought it was going to be, though.
Yes, but
Skylar Thompson made some really nice throws in that game.
Yes, they got dropped. But I will, and they got dropped. But I will propose this, and it's going to be a very weird question. Is it possible that the receivers have gotten used to the left-handed spin of Tua's passes, and all of a sudden the right-handed throws are throwing off their hands?
I think Waddle had the injury too. I gave Waddle a lot of.
Where was Waddle's injury? His wrist?
But no, it wasn't. It was his shoulder. But I think it was bothering him. I really think it was bothering him. He was trying to jump up to catch balls.
He always jumps.
And in that one that to Gesicki, it was tipped. And you guys, when a ball is tipped and you think you're going to catch it here and it moves just a little bit.
Okay, what's the Jeff Wilson drop?
What?
What's the Jeff Wilson drop?
Oh, Jeff Wilson just dropped it.
What's the Tyreek Hill drop?
He just dropped it.
Okay, so again.
Yeah. I mean, those were just drops, but I'm gonna come off of Waddle a little bit. I was really mad at him in that game because I felt like he kept dropping it, but I wasn't mad about the reason at all. That ball got tipped.
But the reason I get upset is not because it was a good defensive play. It hit him right in the hands. It's right there. Why are you letting it go? And there was another pass. Like I understand the Gesicki thing was tipped. It went right through his arms though. It was just like all you had to do was just snap it.
Right.
That's
it's
it.
Hard to adjust that last second. It's hard.
I don't know, man. Like if it's still, I feel like that if it's still like. It's not even like he would have had to like stretch for it. It was just like, it's right here. You can see it. It's going past you. Close your hands. It's there.
It just wasn't meant to be this year, man. Just wasn't meant to be.
It wasn't meant to be. But again, it does prove the point though. this Buffalo Bills team that even this was them at like almost their healthiest. Okay. I know Josh Allen's elbow's messed up. He seems to be ignoring that. I don't know how he is, but he's ignoring it. But nevertheless, he was there and he was making things happen all season long. So they had, of all the things that Buffalo lost even early in the season, they still had their most important guy. Miami did not, and they still were right there with them the whole way.
That's true.
And you now going to tell me that the Buffalo Bills are some kind of AFC East juggernaut? That
I don't think they are, but I guess we're going to find out because they have to beat Cincinnati and then likely beat Kansas City on a neutral field.
We saw what happened to Cincinnati. Cincinnati also played a backup quarterback in Tyler Huntley. They were going to lose that game because their offense could not score on that Ravens defense.
The same defense that Tua absolutely destroyed in week one.
Sure.
Okay. And, it took complete and total fluky luck for the Bengals to win that game. We're going to see now this week. I think that the competition to get to a Super Bowl is where it always was, Kansas City. And next year, the goal is pretty simple. You got to win the division. Go win the division. You win the division, you already have a leg up on the rest of the conference. You're in a good position to do so. You're even going to get a little bit of schedule help because they gave you 9 home games next year against 8 road games. Although usually when they give you the 9 home games against because this year we had more road games than we had home games.
Yeah.
Okay. So you also have to take that into account when you have the 9-8 record. All right. Next year, they're giving us the 9 home games. You gotta think that maybe they're thinking they might send us out. They might send us out to
London.
To London or to Germany or wherever.
It'll probably be London. The Dolphins have a big following there.
They do have a big following in England. Yep.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where it goes. So now, really quickly, because I want to do some very brief discussions about the roster, because I know, Ron, you kept telling me during the season, don't worry about the future. It's the now.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Now I get to talk about the future.
The future is here, man.
This is my time. This is my time to shine.
Yes,
we're going to rebuild the roster. So, obviously, Miami has some fat to trim. They're going to be, $20 million or so over the cap when all the futures contracts are taken care of or so. So, obviously, there is a lot of work that needs to be done.
We don't know even what the cap's going to be.
This is also true. We don't know what the actual cap is.
That's basing it off of this past year cap.
According to, I'm using over the cap. Currently, right now, Miami is over 16.2 million or so over the cap with all the players that they have on their roster. Which, of course, the biggest contract there is Tyreek Hill, whose cap number is going to be 31 million or so.
Yeah.
So easily number one. And I don't know if maybe this is a good idea or not, but quite frankly, I would just take Tyreek, who I know I'm going to keep for a long time. And I'm going to say, we're going to give you a signing bonus, boy. Here you go. We're going to shave off however much money we can with that. Because that's a very easy way to create cap space, right? So
and you could extend Christian Wilkins. That's a big one. You have to do
obviously. Obviously, yes.
How close are we to Sealer's contract being up? Because I know
in a year. In a year, you gotta. But Seal will be a UDFA.
I'd give him a raise now, though, just to keep him around.
If we can, I say do it. Let's keep that tandem.
That's something you can do. That's something you could do right away. But I'll give you an example of something that what they could do with Christian Wilkins. Okay. Like his number is going to be roughly 11 million this year, right?
So per over the cap, his cap hit is about 10.7.
Yeah, so almost 11 million. You extend him right away. Okay, you extend him right away. You convert a lot of that into signing bonus, and you have his base salary in year one be nothing. Make it $4 million. Right there, you're cutting $6 million off your cap right there.
Yep.
That should be one of the first moves that they do. Then they got to get out from under Byron Jones. And once you do that, you're in really good shape. If you can find a trade partner for Cedric Wilson, you're even better shape. If you can get somebody to take Emmanuel Ogbah off of your hands, then all of a sudden you open up a ton of cap space where you're actually a player all of a sudden in free agency. So
and even
it's going to be really it's going to be a really interesting to see. When's the Super Bowl? February 8th, right? Something like that. Usually it's like 2 weeks right after the Super Bowl when everybody starts cutting guys and figuring out their contracts. So like late February, that's going to be really interesting to watch, to see what they do, because they're going to need the cap space for very early March, because I think free agency starts when? March 13th, something like that.
I'm not sure. I do know that if Miami ends up trading Ogba, I'm looking at the number difference. So if the Miami Dolphins end up trading Emmanuel Ogba after June 1st, that's a $15 million cap save. If it's before, then it's an $11 million, which is still a pretty big number, all things considered.
Yeah.
Just that alone would already be a massive boost. And just by trading Ogba and extending Wilkins, in theory, Miami has already beaten the current cap number. So obviously, and again, we don't even know how much the cap is going to end up going up at the end of the day. It could be a massive jump with the whole Amazon deal right now, because that's money. Amazon, anything involving Amazon is money, just money flying everywhere. So this really is not that big of a deal, to be perfectly honest. Easily, yes, trading Cedric Wilson, if you can, that saves you $6 million. You get more draft assets out of it, presumably, because obviously you want more draft picks. I know Chris Greer loves draft picks, and the fact that he's been using them kind of like the Rams lately, it's kind of a little bit of a scary thing to think about, because I know what situation the Rams are in right now. So I kind of want to avoid mortgaging.
Well, here it is. Okay, the Super Bowl is the 12th of February, right? The very next day, the waiver system kicks in for 2023, which means you can start cutting people. Okay, the deadline to tag guys for franchise or transition players is the 21st. Then you got the scouting combine 28th through the 6th, and then you have the deadline is March 7th to hand out franchise or transition players. I don't think the Dolphins have a guy like that. Okay. And then you have the draft eligibility facility visits. They start March 7th. And physical examinations for extensions is the March 8th and 9th. And then March 13th. Yeah, I had it right the first time. March 13th through the 15th is the negotiation period, which is the tampering period. So, which means March 15th is the start of the league year, which is the first day you can sign free agents. So you're talking about there's like a 3-week period where you have to fix your entire cap. So it's from the 21st of February to the 13th. You have to make all of those moves. Dolphins are going to be extremely busy. There's going to be a lot of news for those days. So it's going to be a much, much busier offseason this time around than it was last year. Last year, they signed a lot of players, but they had a lot of open cap space. They didn't have to make any of those moves. Now they have to make all those moves. So if I had to guess, Christian Wilkins becomes a very, very rich man on March 7th.
Which I'm perfectly okay with. He's earned it as far as I'm concerned. He's I once talked about the desire to have like the Madison Surtain duo, and I thought I had it with Howard and Jones for a little while. We'll see where that goes. But the underrated one was the Daryl Gardner Tim Bowens duo, and Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins, man. Like those two together,
they could
scary.
be there. Yeah,
scary. And I don't want to like start making too crazy comparisons, but obviously you know how I feel about Jalen Phillips, because Jalen Phillips and Jalen Phillips to Jason Taylor, man. Jalen Phillips is a beast.
Remember, I want to remind people that the person that everybody got mad that we didn't draft
was Greg Rousseau.
Jalen Phillips was Najee Harris.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, well, I thought it was the Greg Rousseau thing.
Keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, Najee.
That was a good job there.
I mean, Najee's not bad. It's not like he's a bust.
Well, let's talk about one of the most important things that we're going to do this offseason, guys. And since we're staying with Tua, we've got to figure out who's going to be his backup.
Jimmy Garoppolo.
No.
If
Jimmy Garoppolo is not realistic, then who's going to be his backup?
Tom Brady.
No, Tom Brady's not going to come be anybody's backup.
Listen, I love Chad. You know,
Alf, who do you think, man?
I don't know. It's gonna be, they're gonna have to convince Jimmy Garoppolo to come in as the backup, and then it's not gonna be cheap. It's gonna be a hefty number to get Jimmy Garoppolo. Like
we
you're talking
spent
about $10 million.
we spent a hefty number getting Teddy Bridgewater.
Yeah,
Please.
this will be more money though. You're talking
Okay.
about
Yeah,
4
it'll
or
be
5
more.
million more.
But we're not going to be paying Tua that much, so our overall quarterback number won't be that high.
You know, but if I had to get you a number, let me go get some guys, okay? Because there's one that I really, really like. Okay.
Kyle Allen.
Matthias, I wish I could mute Lewis. Why? Because I made the Tom Brady joke. Listen, Chad's not here, so
You mean in general, or just because he talked about Tom Brady?
no, I've been pissing off a lot of people lately, apparently. So, Ruben Borritica, will Aaron Rodgers come to
By the way,
Miami?
if anybody saw Tom
Not as a
Brady
backup.
play, if you saw Tom Brady play, he is so done. It's not even funny. Like I wouldn't want him for my 7-on-7 team.
Father Time finally caught him, and now he's like, got him in a chokehold. It's like, you have escaped me long enough.
Like, look, one thing that the Dolphin fans have to notice: look at Daniel Jones's contract, because he's going to be a free agent. They're going to pay him a pile of money. Start looking at that number and see if that's something that you want to, maybe jump the gun on an extension for Tua, and that might help you.
Look, you're right. That's going to be like close to the same number. Daniel Jones and Tua. That kind of makes sense.
So unless Tua is smart and he bets on himself, and he says, "Nah, I'll wait a year. I'll play a year." Give me the
that guy gets a concussion when he sneezes. I wouldn't make that bet if I were him, but that's just me.
You never know. You never know how it works. Free agents, of course, Nick Mullins. We've talked about him on the show a bunch of times. Another interesting guy, Taylor Heineke. Like, I like that guy. I don't know if you watch him play football. He's not a guy that you can start 17 games with. But if he comes in for a couple of games, that guy has moxie. He could win you a game.
He has the it factor, is what you're saying?
Yeah, he absolutely has the it factor. And that's pretty much out of the guys that are, outside of the big names, what's interesting? Jacoby Brissett just had a monster year in Cleveland. He's also a free agent.
Negative.
That'd be hilarious if they bring him back and all of a sudden he's good in the system.
Negative.
So why was he good in Cleveland?
Yeah, I'd rather have Baker Mayfield.
Tyler Huntley's out there. What does he do anything for you? Doesn't do anything for me.
He does nothing for me.
And then here's the biggest name, Gardner Minshew. Like, that's the name.
Oh, the mustache wonder.
Yeah, Gardner Minshew has not made a dime yet in the NFL. He made $600,000 last year. So
that's a
he hasn't made.
rip-off.
So that's a guy that you could conceivably give a long-term contract to as a backup quarterback. And that used to be the case. Like, it used to be that you would sign your backup quarterback for like $4 million, $4 or $5 million a year, and you get
how many times did Matt Moore come back?
A bunch.
Oh yeah, Matt Moore and Tannehill were together like what, 3 or 4 seasons?
More than that. More than that, I think. I think Matt Moore actually signed several 2-year deals.
Matt Moore was around when he was drafted. It was Garrard, Matt Moore, and Tannehill.
Yeah,
that's right. Because Matt Moore was already here, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yeah, he ended up playing that year.
My dream, though, is I make fun of Lewis because I tell you it's not going to happen. But my dream is I'd love to have Jimmy Garoppolo as the backup. I think he is the ultimate best backup for Tua. I just don't know that it's realistic.
I'd pay the money if we're playing this game, because I'm seeing people saying that Tua is fragile. Okay, fine. If Tua is fragile, then what's the best solution?
That's why we're having this conversation, guys. Right. We know Tua is fragile.
So you send Tua out there for however many games he ends up playing, because that's the whole point. And the idea is that he's going to still play most of the games. But if you are basically guaranteeing in your crystal ball that Tua is good to be down for at least 3 or 4 games a year, then your best bet is to get the best backup humanly possible. And for all the talk we talk about Jimmy Garoppolo only making so much money or so, Garoppolo made $7 million at the end of the year. That was his cap hit, $7 million. Obviously, he'll want more. That's fine. I'll pay him $12 million. We paid Teddy Bridgewater $10 million to do absolutely nothing. So I'm perfectly fine with paying Garoppolo $12, $13 million a year, if that's what he wants to do. Because even if Garoppolo does end up getting hurt a lot. Again, the goal is not for Garoppolo to play the whole season. The point is for Garoppolo to play the 3 or 4 games that Tua is not in.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all we need.
Yeah.
And if something happens to Garoppolo in game 3 of that little stage, well, we can survive one more game with Skylar Thompson. I'm sure we can.
If we still have Skylar Thompson. Because my prediction this time is they will not keep Skylar Thompson on the roster. They will cut him and intend to put him on the practice squad. And if he gets picked up, he gets picked up. That's my guess this time. I don't think they're going to use a spot on him this time. Initially. What do you think, Al?
You're probably right. Yeah, I think that they saw enough. Well, although they're going to see a lot in the OTAs, you never know if he comes in and he looks better this time around, But
and the other thing I want to talk about with Garoppolo really quickly. If Garoppolo wants a chance to show what he can do now, because I don't know how, but apparently Brock Purdy is really good, which is whatever, like good for them, I guess. But with that being said, if Garoppolo wants a chance to show that he can still be just as good as anybody else, like there are going to be teams with interest, I'm sure. But if Garoppolo really wants to ball out, he'll follow McDaniel. He played well with McDaniel. He knows McDaniel. He knows how McDaniel wants to do things. And again, we're basing it off the assumption that he will play, right? At some point he will play. So if I'm a quarterback and I am looking for a new home, and a lot of these other teams are looking around for quarterbacks who they can rest their laurels on, if the best I can do is be an expensive backup, then I'm absolutely going with the one that I'm most familiar with. Yeah, I'll go to Miami. Absolutely. Live in Miami, get the sunshine, get to play with a coach that I'm very familiar with. What's not to love? And oh, by the way, I'm probably making a lot more as a backup this year than a lot of other quarterbacks would. What's the downside to that?
I like it. I just hope that Jimmy G feels the same way, and him and his agent feel like, what Miami's willing to give them as a backup is the best that maybe they could do, and the best situation he could be in. I mean, he could go to the Jets and maybe be a starter, but does he want to?
No.
That's the question.
Nobody wants to go to the Jets right now. And besides, Zach Wilson is still not gone. He's still there.
Yeah. So you just don't know. So we'll see. I think it just depends on what the interest for Jimmy G is as a starter and what teams, if any, are interested as to whether he's going to be available to us as a backup. And
first you have to decide what teams are looking for a starting quarterback right now. Not the
Jets, the Raiders.
The Raiders, maybe.
The Raiders have good personnel too, man. Really good personnel.
The Raiders could
going to the Raiders, except I just don't trust Josh McDaniels as a head coach.
The Raiders could.
I don't trust him now, but Jimmy G might see it a different way with having the guys that they have over there. I
think the Raiders make a lot of sense because Josh McDaniels was a really big advocate for Jimmy Garoppolo in New England.
That's true.
You could tell. You know how you could tell that Jimmy G is probably going to be a target for the Raiders because all of a sudden there was a lot of scuttlebutt as soon as the season ended that Brady might go to the Raiders. And that's coming from Brady's camp because it was all of Brady's mouthpieces in the media. Anybody who saw him play knows that he's kind of done. So Jimmy Garoppolo makes a lot of sense, but he also has his own injury concerns. He's more injured than Tua.
Yeah, I think that's
right.
That's the whole reason why San Fran drafted Trey Lance. It wasn't because Jimmy G couldn't play, it's because he couldn't stay healthy. And if Miami moves on from Tua again this year after this coming season, it'll be for the same reason. It won't be because he can't play, it'll be because he can't stay healthy.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to talk about, and I've since my goal is to make sure the show at least stays within an hour. I'm trying to make that the new goal. We're gonna go ahead and cut it off here. We may do more shows just because there's more to talk about. Running back.
I was going to ask you about the future.
We may need to do another show next week because we're probably going to get news about coaches, who gets to stay, who gets to go. We may get player news. Who knows? Get somebody. Are they going to start talking about negotiations and stuff like that? There's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening right now. So we'll probably we may do another show next week. Who knows? We'll see. I'll get with Ron, and I'll get with Alf, and I'll try to drag Chad back in here kicking and screaming to get back in here.
And Alf is always around to do 50 podcasts a week, right?
Alf is always around.
But I mean, we'll definitely do a couple around free agency, a couple around the draft.
Whenever basically the whole point of the show is supposed to be it's the Pulse of Fins Nation. Whatever gets the pulse racing, we will be there. So with all that being said, thank you everybody for joining us. And once again, make sure that you go over to prizepicks.com. The reason, by the way, we mentioned prizepicks.com so much is not only because of how much they are an amazing platform. I once had people ask me, is PrizePicks even legal in Florida? Yes, it is, because it is a fantasy football platform among other sports. So that is the difference. That's what makes it okay. All you have to do is just choose up to 6 different players across all the professional sports leagues. You can even do boxing. I didn't mention boxing. There's wrestling too, I think. So there's pretty much every sport under the face of the planet. So you can go and just choose the fantasy players projections over for whatever player you want. Just use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit the moment that you sign up. You put in $100, you get $100 back out from them. So basically, you have $200 to play with. The first 100 comes from them, and only after that, if something goes wrong, do you end up dipping into your own savings. So with all that said, thank you everybody for joining us. We will see you all probably next week with another episode of the Pulse of Fins Nation. Good night, everybody.